Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Let's see, it may not be afternoon in some parts of the country. So good afternoon or good morning. Uh, it's good to have you here today. It looks like we've got the bus pulled out up front and everybody's getting out of it and coming into the building here. So we'll give everybody a few more minutes to come in and we'll get started. Pretty excited about today's webinar. For various reasons. And, it's always fun to talk with our guests. We go way back, so we'll get into that a little bit farther when we go to introducing. We'll wait for a few more people to arrive. So while we're waiting, did anybody happen to go to IT Nation? Talk about that in a little bit. That was a big party, I guess, a lot of good times. Let's see here. Here's Michael Bias. Good to see you, Michael. Aaron, good to see you again. John Griffin, always good to see you, man. Is it still cold in Cleveland? That's my big question. It's always cold in Cleveland. The other big news is most of the country saw the northern lights last night. Hope you didn't have any cloud cover. I saw a little bit here. We have a lot of like trees and light pollution from the neighbors. And so I didn't get, the big grand pictures like some of the other people did, but there were some pretty amazing sights. So we're going to stay tuned. I think it's going to happen again tonight. So we're going to stay tuned and see. Not sure where everybody's located, but hopefully you'll get a chance to see them too. All right.
Made it all the way down to Texas.
Texas. Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool. I saw a picture of somebody, I think it was in the Outer Banks on the beach, and they had the northern lights, kind of over the ocean from the beach. It was pretty cool. All right, let's go ahead and get started. Everybody else will surely be here in a few minutes. So just for all the our new guests that have never been with us before, real quickly, Focus Planet was started back in 2013. And I started Focus Planet because when I had my MSP, I used ConnectWise, and I could find a lot of people that could tell me what I needed to do with ConnectWise, but I couldn't find anybody that would do it for me. And I was too busy running the MSP to set up ConnectWise. So I started ConnectWise just to be a resource for other MSPs to build out their ConnectWise for them, or to restructure ConnectWise to fit their current business model, or to help them with projects, or help through how to set it up for sales or service delivery or finance or anything. So that's why we started Focus Planet. We provide both business and ConnectWise consulting for MSPs. And one of the unique things about us is that, when Focus Planet is working with you, we are actually doing the work. So you don't have to worry about building anything out based on our conversations. We just go in and build it all out for you. Another good thing that we do right now, there are no workshop spots open until the beginning of the year. But another thing we do quite a bit is we'll come to your office and do a whiteboard workshop where we lay out kind of how ConnectWise is designed, and then walk through the ACDCs of, setting up your system to be, consistent, and make sure everybody understands their roles and responsibilities with working with the program. So that's what we do. And these ForwardFocus webinars we started, it was kind of an idea of, it'd be nice to get a group of people together just to talk about ConnectWise and the MSP business and business in general every now and then. So that's kind of what this is. It's kind of like a virtual user group for ConnectWise users and MSPs. we talked about, one question I asked is IT Nation. Did anybody make it down to IT Nation? Anybody? Nobody? I didn't either.
I did.
I didn't either. I know, Monique, you were there.
I was there.
So just kind of wondered if anybody went and your thoughts on that. I know it's always a big event and, it's usually a lot of fun and very insightful. So, but if we didn't make it this year, maybe we'll go next year. If you did go to IT Nation and you just don't feel like talking about it right now, keep in mind all the things you learned about ConnectWise. You can always come to us and we'll implement those for you. We'll just talk with you about what you've learned, what you want to change, and get those implemented. All right. So without any further ado, our guest speaker today, Monique and I go way back, further back than what we'd like to admit, I think. When I was just getting started as an MSP, and I was moving from break fix and project work into full-on MSP, I met Chartech. A lot of people, a lot of you already know this. And when I met Chartech, of course, I met Monique, and life hasn't been the same since. So there it is. There it is. I just put it out there. But anyhow, Monique and I go way back, and we've been through a lot in terms of, business is changing and things growing and things changing in the industry. And I'm just so happy to have Monique with us today to talk about some negotiation essentials. And so Monique, welcome. Thanks for being here today.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's really exciting to get to work with you, Bill. I I consider myself kind of operating behind the scenes in both of my organizations. So it's rare for me to do a webinar, but I will tell you when Bill Black asks you to do something, you just do it. And I want to add, we're also in the middle of our own transition using Focus Plan IT right now on the ARC technology side. So we're enjoying working with you in that capacity. And I was trying to think, was it 2009? It had to have been, right?
It
Bill, when we
was,
first met
yeah,
and
it
have
was
been
way
through
back.
iterations of businesses and staff
Mhm.
and, you know, projects and, trying things and failing epically and then getting up and doing it again, which is,
Yeah,
that's what progress is about.
right.
So it's been really fun these past decades, just getting to work side by side with you. So it's a real joy and a pleasure for me to be here today is what I'm trying to get to.
Great. Well, yeah, I appreciate it. It's something we're really looking forward to. So,
Yeah.
all right, here we are, Dr. Monique Rogers, ready to
Yeah.
go.
So
Just
thank
tell
you
me
for
when to
being
click and move the slides.
okay. Thank you. I want to thank everyone for just taking the time out of their day to be here today. I know anytime we cut away from our normal business obligations and opportunities, it's a double-edged sword, right? Because there are things that you're not getting done while you're here. So thank you for taking this time. I want to talk today about negotiation. I had an opportunity to finish my doctorate, and it was basically on negotiation because what I saw in my own experience was every single day is a negotiation. Every single moment, we're negotiating for something, whether it be, with our significant other, our spouse, our partners, our children, who are some of the best negotiators, by the way, especially in their younger years. We're doing this all the time. But the more aware that we are of what we're doing and why we're doing it adds an additional layer in business that can be really powerful. So I want to talk to you today about turning those tough conversations into really profitable agreements and relationships. So we can hit the next slide. Oh, the orange, the epic orange. If you've been to Academy and maybe my session on negotiation, I actually bring an orange into it and a very sharp knife. And I ask the class, if you and I were to negotiate over this orange, what would be your starting position? And without a doubt, most people say, well, I will cut it in half and then you get to pick the side because that keeps things fair. And that makes sense. And that's a good position to have. But that's an error that we make a lot of times when we enter into negotiations of positions over interests. We don't take the opportunity to really understand why we are even negotiating over this orange or what the other party is most interested in. And so when you think about what a negotiation actually is, it's two parties that are having some differences that they need to resolve, and they're really trying to reach an agreement. And the only way to do that is to explore options and exchange offers. And so what do I mean by exploring differences? Well, Bill, if we're doing this negotiation, what would you say about this orange that you would want? What
Um,
interests
I
you about it?
I think I would just like half the orange.
Do you want, are you more interested in the orange juice? Are you an orange juice drinker? Do you want to make a cocktail with the orange juice, or are you a farmer that would be interested in the seeds?
Uh, Probably the orange juice.
Okay,
Yeah.
so let's say I'm only interested in the seeds because I want to grow orange trees. I'm not interested in the juice. In that capacity, just with that moment where we asked each other a few questions and found out more, we realized, hey, Bill, you can have all the pulp and make all the juice. I don't want it. And I can have all the seeds because you don't want the seeds, right? So there's an opportunity for what's called a mutual gain approach, an MGA here, where you, Bill, can get everything you want out of this negotiation, and I can get everything I want. And we walk away from it feeling really good about interacting. And we've also strengthened our relationship through finding out what our interests are, the why of a negotiation versus coming in and saying, this is what the negotiation is. And that's the difference between an integrated negotiation and a differentiating negotiation. So you can hit the next slide. Hopefully I got that through. So then let's talk about why negotiations fail. And we kind of just witnessed that in that little back and forth that we did. A lot of times we're not listening to the other party, right? We're not asking the questions. We're not finding out what their interests are. We're holding our cards really close. We're not reciprocating. Reciprocity is a big thing when you're negotiating. And what that means is I'm willing to show you a few of my interests and things that are close to my heart during this negotiation, and hopefully you will reciprocate and show me the same. And then it starts to build this momentum between us exchanging information, which is the real sort of magic of a negotiation, is that information exchange. The other thing is we're just completely shut out. We're not listening to the other party, or we're making our position and our demands paramount, meaning it's an all or nothing situation, a zero sum situation. I either get this or we're not having a conversation at all. And so that is when negotiations shut down. Also, we give up too early. Um, in a lot of political negotiations, you'll see them return to the table many, many times. And that's not something that's natural. It's difficult to have difficult conversations. So a lot of times it's healthier to just say, hey, it seems like this is escalating. Maybe we should take a break, or can we resume next week, next day after lunch, anything like that. You can hit the next slide. So where do we get into danger and caution? When you're in a negotiation and you start to see the emotions escalate, sometimes, and that's twofold, I do want to say this, sometimes it's healthy because when individuals are exchanging information, sometimes it comes out in a very loud way. You can still gain what you need to get from the negotiation as long as it's staying respectful. When it starts to become a personal attack, you kind of want to shut it down. Next slide. I'm trying to stay on time for you, Bill, because I want to
Thank
give I want to give a lot more. I want to give time for questions. So you might ask, where did a lot of this information come from? These are the references in the books that I base a lot of my curriculum on. Getting to Yes, Getting Past No, both of these authors, William Ury and also Bruce Patton, Harvard's program on negotiation is where that came from. And then 3D negotiation, Daniel Kahneman's Thinking Fast and Slow, which I have that book right here. This is one of the books I refer to all the time. Never Split the Difference by Chris Voss is a fantastic book, and he bases a lot of his curriculum on the 3 books that I just mentioned, as well as the Consensus Building Handbook. A new one that I want to add is Effective Negotiation. So here's another book that I want to give props to as well. Effective Negotiation by Ray Fells and Noah Shear. It's a great educational book on the process as well. You can hit the next slide. So negotiation is the art of letting the other person have your way. And when you think about what that means, it's a way of giving multiple options, or what we call multiple equivalent options, MSAs, to allow a person to select from a group of options. So I'm going to correct myself. Multiple equivalent simultaneous offers. That's what MSO stands for. It's a big way of saying giving multiple offers to a person based on their interests. And so a really good way to do this is to emphasize the importance of really developing and testing alternative proposals to reveal what package or what concept is going to work the best. And this is another, I have to give props to Harvard's program on negotiation for this as well. So you present several equivalent options. They're all your ideas, but you're letting them select which option they have. Next slide. The 5 tenets of negotiation, that comes from Thinking Fast and Slow by Daniel Kahneman. And his theory it's called prospect theory. He won a Nobel Prize for this. And basically what this is about is how people make decisions. So the decision-making process of buying something, investing in something, deciding to put your money on the table when you're gambling at a casino is also a prospect theory, because there's a sense of I'm going to win, but also how am I handling this risk? Am I willing to lose as well? And it's much deeper than that, obviously. But number 1 is being aware and responsible for your personal reactions. So the first concept of negotiation, and it's, again, I have to give props to this book, Thinking Fast and Slow, is understanding when you're in your primitive state and when you're in your conscious state. So each of us has sort of this, and I'm getting deep into the science here, this part of us that is very primitive. We can be reactive. It's a part of our brain that was meant to save us during survival. So we are, eating, we are procreating, and we are making sure we are safe. And in situations like negotiation, which can feel like a survival mechanism, you have to maintain that consciousness of thinking slower, not reacting to the other person, not getting escalated in emotion. So that's the first rule. Know thyself. Basically, be aware and responsible for your own personal reactions. Number 2, we've talked about this already, focusing on their interests and the climate control of their interests, making sure that we set the table. So this is something we'll get in a little bit later to in this presentation, is being the table setter for a negotiation. And while you're doing that, asking them those curious questions. Just ask about the orange. What about this orange interests you? What do you want? Do you want the seeds? Do you want the pulp? Do you want the rind? And then number 3, working to create this win-win situation. So we expand the pie by asking, we've set the table, we're being aware of our own conscious thoughts, and now we're going to create a win-win situation where everybody gets their piece of the pie. And then building the golden bridge. So the 4th tenet really comes into play, I would say, when you've got a deep, maybe kind of a person who's holding their cards really close to their heart, or they're emotionally invested in the negotiation. So being able to build this bridge of what can I offer you that makes you feel better? building the golden bridge has a lot more to do with the intangible assets of the negotiation than the tangible. And by that, I mean, tangible assets are things like price, delivery time, um, product level. Intangible assets are the why. Why do you need this? Okay, let me make a concession. If I can give this to you at this price and I promise an early delivery, does that make you feel better about this negotiation? And then also power. This is a huge sort of conversation and negotiation of what is power and what do you do when you have a power imbalance. So power in negotiation is relational. And it's always good to use whatever power you have, whether you have more or less in a negotiation, as a way to educate the other party. So I would say a negotiator's power increases when they have more alternatives. So in other words, what's known as a BATNA, which is a best alternative for a negotiated agreement. I know that's a big term, and we'll talk a little more about this later. But a BATNA, it provides a valuable information of legitimacy through authority, expertise, or precedent. So the three sort of prongs of power in a negotiation are information. So gather your information, legitimacy, which is usually authority. Are you legit to have this negotiation with me? Are you someone who can make a decision in this process? And then the value of the relationship. So who's benefiting from maintaining this ongoing relationship? Next slide. So the mutual gains approach, which we just talked about, this is another sort of Harvard program on negotiation concept. It's creating an environment where, first of all, mutual gains are possible, just like we did with the orange. It has a framework. It's identifying where I have impact over you, and it's modeling this better way of being self-aware and capable and diagnosing the person that's across from you. There's a lot of psychology in negotiation too. What mutual gains is not, it is not zero sum. And again, a lot of people walk into a negotiation with this win-lose mindset. My win is your loss, my loss is your gain kind of mindset. There is a possibility with the right framework for both of us to get exactly what we want out of this negotiation. It's also, people think that, negotiation, if you have a great personality, you will be good at this. I'm going to counter that and say no. There are three things that are really important to a negotiation. Personality is not necessarily one of them. Skills, your cognitive ability, and your emotional intelligence. Those are the three things that both Harvard and USC have said are more important than having just a good personality. And then being able to separate your tangible interests from your intangible interests as well. So separating cultural norms, separating things that you have encountered or that are coming in from your past. And I think what I'm sort of touching on here are knowing your biases. So knowing the areas in which you go to when you are in negotiations, such as anchoring too early. Are you the first one to throw the price down? Are you framing appropriately? And again, these are all tools and concepts of an effective negotiator. Next slide. So we talked a little bit about this already, what makes a negotiation successful. And there are a lot of elements, but in particular right now, I would love to talk about the difference between goals and interests. So the difference between those two, when you have a goal, you want to get a certain price, or you want to buy this car for a certain price, or get the deal. That's a goal. But what is the real interest underlining that goal? And when you think about this, first of all, goals are measurable. They have to do with time, money, or specific terms. Interests reveal why those goals matter. So they explain at a surface level the objectives, the motivations, and those things that give meaning to why you want this. And I'll give you an example. A company might be looking, to lower a settlement. Maybe you're involved in a legal dispute. So the goal is to get the settlement lowered, but the interest could be more in protecting the company's reputation or avoiding, public liability. those types of things. And I'm actually drawing off, I don't know if anybody has seen the movie Erin Brockovich, which was a great movie about a lawsuit that was filed here in California against PG&E, and it was sort of a David and Goliath kind of situation, a small town, that had been negatively affected by PG&E dumping toxic water into their well system. And so, that company was way more interested in making sure that their publicity wasn't negative over this, by offering these homeowners, small amounts really to buy their homes and cover it up. In the end, the whole thing blew up. Of course, it turned into a multi-million dollar settlement. But the interests there were very different. PG&E's interest was to keep this quiet. Erin Brockovich and the law firm that she worked for, her interest was to get justice for those that had been affected. Next slide. So I want to give you a case study after talking about Erin Brockovich. This was an actual case that went through ARC and that I managed. It was a client that we had had for 15 years, and it was about $10,000 per month. It was what we called managed assist. And we always do, whenever we lose a client, we do what's called a postmortem to see, what happened and how we can learn from the situation. So in our assessment, we saw that there had been staff changes. There were technology challenges with the staff using Azure. And there had been 6 to 8 months of issues that they had stated were unresolved. It was a 24-month it was a 36-month contract, and they were 24 months in, so they still had 12 more months. Also, there was a strong relationship between one shareholder of ARC, which was actually me, and one of the owners of this organization. So I was really surprised when this happened and the cancellation letter came through. And it had already reached capacity where we saw they would not be returning. And, we're in this situation now where we have to have a discussion about buying out this contract and what we're going to do and still preserving the relationship. So in the post-mortem, what we discovered was that the client had not been very confident anyway in that solution. They were a traditional model CPA firm. They did not need a lot of technology advancement. Their mentality and their interests were, if it's not broke, why fix it? Let's keep things the same. A competing MSP had developed some strong relationships with them. And this was the unknown unknown, or what Chris Voss often calls the black swan, right? We didn't know that this had happened. There was another MSP that had sort of come in underneath the radar and was having conversations with one of their other shareholders. So they canceled our agreement after signing up with this new provider, which was unfortunate, but it happens. We also discovered that they had not been using the ConnectWise portal properly for tickets, and they were emailing our technicians directly. And so this was an epic failure in communication, but also in our own ability to process their needs. Obviously, emailing is not the way to go if they're trying to open tickets. So it was an interesting postmortem. So next slide. And what we discovered during the process of this was we had to create an opportunity for them to buy out this contract. We had made third-party investments, obviously, with vendors to support their cloud services. So we had signed contracts on their behalf as well. And so we had to really create this opportunity to discuss, hey, there's $110,000 left on your 12-month contract. We've got to figure this out. And so the negotiations began, and they agreed, luckily, to pay a lot of the fees that they were in for and exit the contract. But I want to use this example to highlight two of the terms that are often used in negotiations. So the ZOPA, which are zones of possible agreement, and the BATNA, which is the best alternative for a negotiated agreement. So when you go into a negotiation, you have to know what your BATNA is, which is the concession that the lowest concession you're willing to make in a negotiated agreement. So if you don't get what you want, what is the best alternative to what you want? And also knowing what their BATNA is. So what they want and their best alternative is what really creates this zone of possible agreement. So if they're coming in and saying, we're willing to pay you 80,000, not 100,000, within that concept there were concessions. So we agreed to more of we agreed to take less money for an easier buyout. They ended up buying their equipment. They ended up paying off the third party agreements that were involved in their agreement, and they paid us an additional 3 months of support while they were in transition. So what I'm saying is this BATNA included a lot of other offers. So there wasn't just a win-lose, give us this or we're going to court, because we all know litigation is expensive. It was a conversation about unpacking all of the pieces of the offering in order to find a possible agreement. Next slide. And I simplified that. It was very complex. I'm simplifying that for time's sake because I'm watching the clock as well. So this is what ended up happening. There was a complete buyout of the 12 months on the contract. They bought their equipment and we maintained the relationship for 12 months of afterwards. So we are still in conversation with this firm. I believe that we were able to leave on good terms. Everyone sort of got what they wanted. It was sad to see them go, but we understood. And the most important thing is we avoided costly litigation that could have drug out for, 2 or 3 years, which that was one of our interests right there, is we didn't want to go to court. Next slide. So one of the big things, and we talked about this a little bit earlier, is who is the table setter. And the negotiation or a negotiation begins the moment you start the conversation. So a lot of people think it begins, when you have that meeting. One of the things we do at ARC to strengthen our BATNA is we only do presentations in our own building. So we set up a meeting, we do a tour of our building, we give notice to all of our staff that we're having a tour to make sure that they greet whoever comes in. We put their logos up on all the TVs around our office, welcoming them and just making it more of an experience rather than just a presentation. Another thing we do is we do deep research on the individuals that we're presenting to as well. We look at their social media. We might see what groups they are members of. One in particular was a construction company, and I can remember this negotiation because they were renewing their contract and they had a lot of questions and they were growing very quickly. And when I did my research on one of the owners, I found out that she had a nonprofit that collected baseball equipment, unused baseball equipment, to give to other kids who couldn't afford equipment. So as kids are playing in club, it can get very expensive to buy all the equipment, and she saw that, and so she started a nonprofit where she collected that and then gave it away to kids in need. So during the conversation of her re-sign, one of the things I brought up was her nonprofit. And I said, I would really like to be maybe a drop-off station for you to be able to collect this equipment. We have a huge warehouse, and once a year we could say, hey, come and drop off your gently used or unused equipment at ARC, and use this client's logo as well, and do kind of a collaboration that helped her nonprofit. And that added so much value to our relationship with them. And the reality of it was, that like, would it happen? Did she want to do it? Could she do it? Yes. But it was more of like, wow, you care about the same things that I care about. You're interested in the same things I'm interested in, which is, community efforts and collaboration and helping kids, which that's one of our charitable notions at ARC, is if it helps kids and animals, then it's always a yes. And so it strengthened the relationship. And I would even say it really healed some of the differences that we were having during the re-sign. So again, who is the table setter? How are you setting the table? And how are you doing your homework on the people that are sitting across the table from you? Next slide. Oh, this is a really long term for just, I mean, we could have probably just said pay attention instead of systematically organize the obvious. I feel like that's a UC or university level term. It's important to self-reflect, right? One of the best things you can do is know your own biases, your preferences, and know the areas within a negotiation that you get in your own way. So to know thyself. Anticipate your barriers to the agreement. And again, at the end of this presentation, I have a free download that's actually a document that you can go through before the negotiation. It's always good to prepare and do that pre-mortem analysis. So before you even go into the negotiation, there's an hour of work or at least 2 hours of work to do. We have a saying, if we're going into an hour meeting, it means we've done 2 hours of prep work. We know who's there, how to set the table, what we're doing within our own facility, and what is the best way to interact with this individual. Also, the climate control, creating that collaborative problem solving. What do you want out of this orange? Asking those curious questions, making sure that we're taking note of their interests, not just their goals, that we know both their tangible and intangible interests. And then fostering that mutual gains approach, how big can we expand this pie so that everyone can get their piece? And then the inevitable BATNA question, which is, what are we going to do if we don't agree? It's one of the best questions to ask the person or the company across the table is, what are we going to do if we're not able to agree? Next slide. The 180 assessment, which we just talked about, has more to do with that post-mortem. So afterwards, making sure that we've looked at all the different ways in which we can unpack this offering and create those mesos, those multiple offerings, so that we really make the client feel like that decision was their decision, even though we were the ones that actually created the offerings. Next slide, Bill. So how do you close the exit? Something that we talk a lot about at Chartech is closing the sale, but there's also something about closing the exit. So how do you end things? It's important, again, to assess what not having an agreement looks like. And we said that in that previous question, asking right out of the gate, hey, if we don't come to an agreement today, what's that going to be like? Does that mean we have to go to litigation? Does that mean court? Because that's not going to be a great experience for either of us. Striving to improve your BATNA through aligning it with their interests is huge. So that involves making sure you're asking the right questions, that you've set the table correctly, that you've offered up different packages for them to choose from, that you walk them through several different scenarios. And then striving to weaken their BATNA. But that means first you've got to understand what theirs was. So again, asking those questions with curiosity and getting invested in what their interests are, not just in a manipulative or frivolous way, but really interested in how you can help them achieve their goals as well. Creating value before claiming it. So this is really a mutual gains sort of pivotal point, is when you've created enough value and expanded the pie enough before you start actually passing those pieces out. And because when you do start claiming the value, the idea behind it is that everybody gets what they want. Bill gets the orange juice and I get the seeds to begin my orchard. Being strategic with sharing and withholding information. So there's something about reciprocity that builds trust. And I have to go back to what that word really means. And I want to give you the actual definition. So reciprocity in negotiation, it refers to that natural human tendency and response to act with an action that you are being acted upon. So you're responding to another's action with a similar action, creating this cycle of mutual exchange and trust. And I will tell you that Fells and Shear, they do the best job really explaining reciprocity if you really want to understand, the science behind it and why it's important. So basically, when one party shares information or makes a concession and demonstrates goodwill, usually the other party will mirror that behavior. But it also works in a competitive way. So if you come into a negotiation and you're being very competitive, you might get that competitiveness back in reciprocity as well. So again, it goes back to setting the table. How are we being in this negotiation? Orchestrate and pace the conversations and add interventions and concessions for effect. That is huge when it gets emotional and intense. So make sure that you're pacing this negotiation and this conversation. And let me tell you, Bill Black is so good at this part because his tone, the way I always refer to you as just like a big cup of hot chocolate because you make people so comfortable, where they just want to sit down and have a conversation with you. So as far as orchestrating and pacing conversations, Bill, if you could do a webinar just on that, how to talk and make people want to listen, it you have that, and I think it's an innate a characteristic of just who you are.
Oh,
um,
thank you.
you're you're very disarming and it's easy to talk to you. So that is a
Thanks.
wonderful characteristic to have in a negotiation. Leveraging deadlines and creating a commitment to implement. So one thing that I have found in negotiation is time constraints um, can work for you. And that's again part of Daniel Kahneman's his theory on his prospect theory is time constraints have a way of pushing people into that survival mode, like we've got to make a decision right now. So knowing that you can leverage deadlines or that you can also push deadlines if you're not ready to make that decision is really important. And I don't know if any of you have ever been in a situation where, it's like, call now, make your decision now, the offer's going away. Um, that is a way of negotiating a decision as well and pushing you into that thinking fast brain, that primitive brain, that fight flight brain that often overrides our cognitive ability and makes us want to make that decision quick. And sometimes those decisions aren't always the best, but sometimes it works in a negotiator's favor. I'll just say that it's a double-edged sword. And then, of course, this is one of the bonuses that I give. Consider the interests of all the shareholders and decision makers involved. And this is something that we teach in our sales lab at Chartech, which is always make sure that you're presenting to someone that can make the decision or that makes all of the decisions. Um, we, in our own experience, have honed that because if you're wasting your time negotiating with somebody who doesn't have the legitimacy to even make the decision, why are we doing this? I hope that makes sense. So that legitimate factor of power that we spoke about earlier is really important to have in the room. Next slide. And I know you said we're just going to try to get as far as we can get, Bill. I
Look
hope
at
we
that.
did it. I
Look
really
at
hope
that.
we did it. I hope you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Also, if you would like that worksheet, please email me at monique@chartech.net, and I will email you back that mutual gains worksheet. This is something I use for every negotiation. It's a 2-page worksheet. I actually print it out and write all over it for every negotiation that I do. And it helps to prepare you that 2 hours of work that you're going to do for a 1 hour negotiation. It's really important that you prepare. And if I could tell you anything about how to make a negotiation successful, the first thing is you have to prepare. You have to do your homework. You have to understand who's sitting across the table from you. I always say, know the animal you're taming. So know the animal that you're sitting across the table with, know what food they like, what their interests are before they even walk in the room. Have it ready. And I don't know if we have any questions or if we have time for questions. I'm at that well, my clock says 9:45. Some of yours
Yeah.
probably say 12:45.
Yeah,
But
there
we're
you
here.
go. Yeah, this is great. Does anybody have any questions or wanted to start up a discussion about what we've talked about so far?
This is just a drop in the bucket.
It's a drop in the bucket,
This is a
obviously.
drop in the bucket.
Yeah,
I really tried to condense a 2-hour presentation down into about 38 minutes.
yeah, yeah. I could tell. Yeah, that's okay. So yeah, I got a couple of questions. So my biggest thing is, most, I wouldn't say most, but in some cases, MSPs, like, and business owners in general, not just MSPs, maybe misunderstand negotiation. Is there any specific or kind of general mindset shift that you could come up with that they need to make that would help them understand a little bit more effectively?
Absolutely. I feel like what you might be leaning into are behaviors. So do we want to talk about unhelpful behaviors and helpful behaviors? Would go in that direction.
Yeah, yeah,
So yeah, really helpful behaviors in negotiation. If you're turning this into a practice, using very clear statements about what and why, having their full attention and saying, this is why we're negotiating. This is what we're negotiating for. And that's part of setting the table. And also, really coming into it with a genuine interest in getting to a decision, opening it up and saying, the whole purpose of us coming here today is to make a decision on whether we are your chosen IT professionals or not, so that we have a yes or a no answer. But that's again part of setting that table. And then understanding that asking more open-ended questions. I feel like a lot of MSPs that I talk to, it's very yes or no. Do you have, it's almost like a checklist during the discovery. Do you have this? Yes. Do you have this? No. Versus inviting that explanation or that vested interest in why that business is even in business. Maybe it's a family business that has a long history in the community that they work in, and understanding how many tentacles they actually have and what they do versus going in and just doing that yes no discovery. um, Again, using that reciprocity and disclosure, it's really called drip feeding. So I'm sharing something, you're sharing something. It starts to encourage this mutual openness of conversation and relationship. And then, of course, it's really important to restate what you've heard back to them. Uh, this is where I see in communication and the psychology of communication where people miss the boat. They're already ready to ask the next question when they haven't even heard the answer, or they haven't dug a little deeper or gone to that next level. So using that reciprocity by sharing information and then repeating it back to them what they just said. It's a
okay,
restatement. It reduces misunderstanding and it shows that engagement. Also, summarizing what they said, and Bill, you're really wonderful at this too. I always hear you say, so what I'm hearing is dot
yeah,
dot dot, right? That's
yeah,
one of the best things you can do is just ask for clarification, because if you got it wrong, they're going to correct you,
yeah, yeah,
right? I mean, behaviors that are not helpful, obviously interrupting, dominating the conversation. That feels very disrespectful during a negotiation. Not reciprocating, looking like you have information that you're withholding. Long, rambling statements, criticizing or using anything aggressive, judgmental language. Not taking the time to even revisit a topic, going back and saying, just one more time, I want to make sure I understand this.
Mhm. Do you,
So
do you,
those are helpful.
do you feel like, when somebody's going in and do you feel like there would be any sort of like warning signs for when people become, I don't want to say off the rails
Yeah.
in a negotiation, or, become more transactional and more, and not so much, trying to, understand the other party? I mean, are there like warning signs that come up when you can see that happening?
I look for body language first. Again, I'm somebody that always tries to understand the animal I'm dealing with. And if you've ever owned a dog or a cat or any,
Mhm.
kind of pet, they will give you a warning sign physically that they're uncomfortable before they'll ever bite you. You'll get an opportunity, right? So I look
Yeah,
for that in
yeah.
people too. And again, this is part of Daniel Kahneman's fast and slow. We've got our primitive brain and we have our cognitive brain, and the primitive brain will always override unless we're aware of it. So watching body language, crossed arms, they lean back in their chair, they lean away from you.
Mhm.
They're obviously looking at their watch. Many of you are very aware of these. They shut down. They're not offering any more information. And in my experience, it's been good to actually call that out early in the negotiation to say, "Hey, I'm starting to sense like this isn't going the way that you expected, or I'm feeling like you kind of are shutting down. Can you tell me what's going on?"
Yeah.
And that's more of that comes from the therapist side of me. That's the industrial and organizational psychology side, where you are paying more attention to the human behavior. But
Mhm.
it's imperative to see that when you're sitting at
It's interesting. Another thing that I'm thinking about is, what was it? How was it you put power is preparation in disguise or something like that? It's, so like the preparation for negotiation where you got to spend an hour to meet for an hour, or y- is there, do you see a lot of that happening where people just go right into negotiation without even being prepared? And then that in turn causes the negotiation to become more transactional or more confrontational. Is that a thing?
I think she's frozen.
Oh no,
I think we lost her.
I think we lost her. All right, prepare for your negotiations. I'll put it that way. How about that? Hopefully she'll come back in. Um, yeah, she talked about, preparing for negotiations. Um, and then the other thing I thought was interesting was going through and doing the post-mortem on what broke down in the negotiation of the day-to-day support for a client, So like you got this client, you think everything's going fine, and then all of a sudden from out of nowhere, they're like, okay, we're done, and hey, Monique, glad to have you back.
Hi. I just had a huge power surge at my house. Like everything just went woo
Oh, oh no.
in a
Uh,
really powerful conversation.
we were talking about a couple of things. One was, the whole thing about power is preparation in disguise. And,
Yes.
if you're not prepared for a negotiation and you go from one thing to the other every day, and then all of a sudden you're walking into a negotiation and you're not prepared, there's obviously a correlation between with that and that negotiation becoming more combative, or you know what I'm saying? Does that make sense? Where it's pretty
Absolutely.
obvious
And
that somebody wasn't prepared, so therefore this is contentious.
when you think about the best athletes, and
I think we lost her again. Power problems. Anyhow,
I don't know.
there, you're back.
Yeah, when you think about the best athletes and the people who are at the top of their game, they don't just walk onto the court, right? They've done hours, years, decades, lifetimes of preparation to get ready for what they're doing. So why would you walk into a negotiation any other way than having done the prep work?
Yeah, good point. It'll be like,
Yeah.
I'll think about that when I'm watching the Colts at the Super Bowl this year. Yeah.
I hope they make it.
We're going to the Super Bowl. Yeah, so good. And then the other question I had, oh my goodness. Yeah, it's something about the postmortem when you lose a client unexpectedly.
Yeah.
Like in your example, are there, when you have active clients working with you, are there ongoing negotiations that have to happen? Is that QBRs, or is that owner meetings, or how do you place that into the big picture?
QBRs are huge. They're an opportunity for a friendly negotiation. And I think I'm just going to call it out there. Sometimes we get lazy with those, because we don't hear from these clients. So no news must be good news, when in the reality, we were completely blindsided by that particular situation, which is why I use it as a case study. Because those QBRs are what I would call friendly negotiations. It's a time to go in and review everything and go over any issues and calm the waters if there are things arising.
Yeah.
But it doesn't mean you do any less prep work. You still are looking at who's running the company, who has the legitimacy, where is the relationship at, and that emotional connection.
Yeah. So if we, um, being prepared brings you power to the negotiation, and the whole idea is to keep that power throughout the relationship and maintain the power after the contract is signed by,
Right.
you're basically every interaction is a negotiation with
That's
that client.
correct.
Yeah.
And remembering that power is relational. It's relational, right?
Yes.
Sometimes we have the power, sometimes we don't. And so making sure that, we understand who has the better outside options if the deal falls through, who understands the market, the timing, the priorities more clearly, who actually is capable of making the decisions, and signing the contract, and then who benefits more from maintaining the ongoing relationship. Who's really the one that has the upper hand in this, and understanding that then your BATNA is designed all around that.
Yeah. Okay. It's been great having you here. I wish we had more time. Maybe we can do this again next year.
I don't think the internet can handle both of us at the same time either, at least not at my house.
It's pretty obvious,
Talk
right?
about power. The whole thing just went dark.
It's pretty obvious. Well, okay. As Afton put in the chat, if you need to leave, we're on YouTube, and this will be on YouTube here, later today or tomorrow, and we'll get it out here. You can look at all of our ForwardFocus webinars on YouTube, and I'm constantly adding some sort of content out there. So hit subscribe. What is it? You hit subscribe and something, like and subscribe. There you go.
And also, if you want that downloadable worksheet, please email me. It's just Monique, my first name, @chartech.net. I'll be happy to correspond with you and get that to you.
Perfect. All right, let's spin to win. Today, the prize is a Focus Planet Cutco knife spreader.
That's perfect to cut oranges with, by the way.
Jack, congratulations. Congratulations. All right, I'll get that in the mail to you. And thanks for being here today. We really appreciate it. Dr. Monique Rogers, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure. Afton, thanks again. It's always great having these, and I'm looking forward to the next one.
Thank you. And I hope to see you at Academy soon.
Oh, yeah. If you want to go to Chartech Academy, it's December 9 through 11, I believe.
Yes,
And
December 9th through the 11th. And we
when
have
this-
some pre-day workshops. So if you're interested in a pre-day workshop and then attending Academy, use the code webinar and Bill Black will get you 75% off.
there you go.
So thank
There
you
you
for
go.
being here. I hope to see you all there.
Thanks, everybody.